Steve McQueen. Have you ever wondered why the most celebrated motorcycle jump in cinema history was performed on a bike that almost never made it to the set? What if the Great Escape's Triumph TR6 Trophy was concealing decades of buried secrets that even the most devoted Steve McQueen historians completely overlooked? These are 20 weird facts about the Great Escape's Triumph TR6 Trophy that will completely blow your mind. Number 20. Triumph had no idea their motorcycle would become the most famous bike in cinema history. When Triumph Motorcycles supplied units to the Great Escape production in 1962, the manufacturer's commercial expectations for the arrangement were modest to the point of being almost dismissive. Triumph's American distributor, Johnson Motors, handled the supply arrangement as a routine promotional exercise rather than a strategically significant brand opportunity. Nobody at Triumph's Meriden factory in England anticipated that their TR6 Trophy would emerge from the production as the single most recognizable motorcycle in Hollywood history. The supply arrangement generated no special internal documentation, no dedicated marketing follow-up plan, and no executive attention beyond standard distributor correspondence. Triumph supplied the bikes because they were asked and because the exposure seemed modestly useful. The cultural earthquake that followed the film's release in 1963 arrived as a complete surprise to every level of the organization. Triumph spent years afterward attempting to commercially capitalize on an association they had sleepwalked into without recognizing its significance. Number 19. Steve McQueen was not the first choice to perform the jump. The legendary barbed wire jump that closes the Great Escape's motorcycle chase sequence was not originally intended for Steve McQueen to perform in any capacity. Director John Sturges had planned the jump as exclusively stunt work from the earliest production discussions, with McQueen's involvement limited to dialogue scenes and lower-speed riding sequences that his insurance provisions could accommodate. McQueen's determination to perform the jump himself created a contractual crisis that required the production's legal and insurance teams to construct an elaborate workaround. The solution involved McQueen performing as an uncredited stunt performer in a sequence where he was technically doubling himself, a legal fiction that satisfied the insurance underwriters while giving McQueen the footage he demanded. The arrangement was unprecedented in the production's experience and required approval from multiple parties who each understood different versions of what they were actually authorizing. And number 18, the TR6. Trophies were disguised as German military motorcycles, the Triumph TR6. Trophy is an unmistakably British motorcycle, bearing no visual resemblance to any German military motorcycle that would have been operating in occupied Europe during the Second World War. The Great Escape's production design team faced the considerable challenge of transforming a 1962 British Trials bike into something that read on camera as period-correct German military equipment from the early 1940s. The disguise program applied to the Hero bikes involved bodywork modifications, paint treatments, and accessory additions specifically selected to create a plausible wartime German visual impression at the camera distances the sequences would use. The modifications were entirely cosmetic and entirely reversible. At close examination, the bikes remained obviously British, but Sturges calculated correctly that the sequence's pace and camera distances would prevent audiences from scrutinizing the period accuracy closely enough to register the fundamental anachronism underneath the disguise. Number 17. McQueen performed the jump. Twice before, a usable take was achieved.
Now, 30 years after it premiered, The Great Escape is still...
The barbed wire jump that became cinema's most celebrated motorcycle moment required 3 separate physical attempts before the production achieved footage designated as usable. McQueen completed the first attempt successfully from his own perspective, but the primary camera position had experienced a mechanical problem that invalidated the footage. The second attempt was McQueen's as well, but the landing produced a handling moment that the stunt coordinator assessed as marginally outside acceptable parameters for a principal actor. The third attempt was assigned to Bud Eakins, McQueen's professional stunt double, whose execution produced the footage ultimately used in the finished film. McQueen's two personal attempts exist in the production's raw footage archive. Whether they were superior or inferior to Eakins' version has been a matter of discussion among McQueen biographers for decades, but the production's decision was made on safety grounds rather than visual quality assessment. Number 16. The production imported bikes that were technically illegal in West Germany. The Great Escape filmed its exterior sequences in West Germany during 1962. The Triumph TR6 Trophy bikes imported for production use arrived in West Germany under temporary importation provisions, but carried a compliance problem that the production's logistics team had not identified during pre-production planning. The specific handlebar configuration fitted to the imported bikes did not conform to West German road vehicle regulations applicable during that period. Operating the bikes on any West German public road in their imported specification was technically illegal under local traffic law. The production managed this problem by ensuring all sequences involving the bikes on actual West German roads were filmed under closed road permits that suspended normal traffic law provisions for the filming period. Any movement of the bikes between locations on public roads required the handlebar configuration to be temporarily modified before transit and restored before filming resumed. Number 15. A Triumph engineer. Was secretly embedded in the production Triumph, Motorcycles quietly placed a factory engineer within the Great Escape's transportation department, without publicly acknowledging his presence or his role. The engineer's official cover within the production was a general transportation support position that gave him legitimate access to the bike fleet, without identifying him as a manufacturer representative. Triumph's motivation was straightforward. The TR6 Trophy was a current production model being used in conditions that would test its reliability publicly in front of a global audience. Any mechanical failure visible on screen or during a public stunt sequence would generate negative brand impressions that Triumph wanted to prevent through proactive mechanical oversight rather than reactive damage management. The embedded engineer's access allowed him to identify and address potential mechanical issues before they became visible problems. His presence was known to the transportation coordinator, but was never disclosed in any production documentation or press material released during or after the production. Number 14. The bike's iconic blue color was mixed by hand on location. The specific shade of blue applied to the Great Escape's hero, Triumph TR or TR6. Trophy was not a standard factory color available from Triumph's production line. The transportation department's painter mixed the hero bike's color by hand at the West German filming location, using a base reference provided by the production designer. The mixing process required several attempts before the painter achieved a shade that the cinematographer confirmed would read correctly on the Panavision film stock being used for the production. Film stocks of the early 1960s had specific color rendering characteristics that made certain shades photograph differently from their appearance to the human eye. The blue selected for the hero bike was chosen for how it would render on film rather than how it looked in direct observation. The exact formula used for the hand mix was recorded in the painter's personal notes, but was never transferred to any official production document. Number 13. McQueen lobbied to add the chase sequence after the script was finalized. The motorcycle chase sequence that made The Great Escape immortal in automotive cinema history was not part of the film's original screenplay. Steve McQueen lobbied director John Sturgis to incorporate a substantial motorcycle sequence after the script had been completed and production had already commenced. McQueen's argument was partly creative and partly self-interested. He believed the film needed a sequence that would distinguish his character from the ensemble cast and provide a standout action moment the marketing campaign could anchor. Sturgis was initially resistant, concerned about budget implications and the structural disruption of adding a major sequence to a finalized script. McQueen persisted across several weeks of production. His persistence eventually succeeded, but the sequence was added under budgetary constraints that required economies elsewhere in the production to accommodate it. The chase sequence that defined the film's legacy was therefore an addition that nearly didn't happen. Number 12. The jump location was found by McQueen during a personal scouting drive. The specific geography used for the Great Escape's barbed wire jump sequence was not identified through the production's official location scouting process. Steve McQueen discovered the location during a personal exploratory drive he conducted through the Bavarian countryside on one of the production's rest days using a privately rented motorcycle. He recognized the terrain's potential for the jump sequence he had been advocating and brought the location coordinator back to the site the following day. The production's official assessment confirmed the location's suitability, and it was incorporated into the filming plan. The irony of McQueen finding the location for a sequence the director had been reluctant to add was noted by crew members at the time. The Bavarian landscape that provides the chase's visual backdrop was therefore the result of McQueen's personal initiative rather than the professional location scouting process the production had employed. Number 11. Bud Eakins performed the jump in a single rehearsal pass. Before the filmed attempt, professional stunt performer Bud Eakins, who ultimately performed the barbed wire jump that appears in the Great Escape's finished film, completed exactly one rehearsal pass over the jump structure before the cameras rolled for the filmed attempt. The single rehearsal was not a cautious approach born of excessive confidence. It reflected a deliberate risk management calculation by the stunt coordinator. Each pass over the jump imposed stress on the Triumph TR6 Trophy's front forks and frame that accumulated progressively. The coordinator calculated that limiting pre-filming passes to one preserved the bike's structural integrity for the filmed attempt, rather than degrading it through repeated rehearsal loading. Eakins agreed with the assessment and used his single rehearsal pass to gather the specific information he needed about the approach, the ramp angle, and the landing geometry. His filmed attempt the following pass was therefore performed on a motorcycle whose structure had experienced exactly 2 jumps in total. Number 10. The Triumph TR6 Trophy inspired a 40-year legal dispute over ownership. The question of who legally owned the principal hero, Triumph TR6 Trophy used in The Great Escape, became the subject of a disputed ownership claim that persisted across 4 decades following the production's conclusion. The bike passed through several hands immediately after filming wrapped, with documentation from the transfer period containing ambiguities that multiple subsequent parties interpreted differently to support competing ownership claims. The production company's vehicle disposal records showed the bike as transferred to one recipient. Johnson Motors, Triumph's American distributor who had arranged the original supply, maintained their own documentation suggesting a different disposition entirely. A third claimant emerged in the 1980s, presenting a bill of sale from a private individual who claimed to have purchased the bike from a crew member in 1963. Each claimant's documentation was internally consistent but mutually incompatible with the others. The dispute was never resolved through litigation. It simply persisted in an unresolved state as each successive claimant aged or lost interest, without the matter reaching any formal legal conclusion. The bike's current authenticated location remains a subject of genuine uncertainty among McQueen vehicle historians. Number 9. The production's insurance company demanded a test jump before approving the sequence. Before The Great Escape's production insurance provisions could be extended to cover the barbed wire jump sequence, the underwriting company demanded a witness test jump performed under conditions replicating the filmed sequence as closely as possible. The demand was unusual. Most production insurance arrangements of the early 1960s did not include provisions requiring witnessed stunt demonstrations before coverage approval. The underwriter's position reflected genuine uncertainty about whether the proposed jump was achievable within parameters their actuarial models could accommodate. Bud Eakins was assigned to the test jump, which was performed at a location separate from the filming site before an underwriter's representative whose technical knowledge of motorcycle stunts the stunt coordinator privately described as essentially non-existent. Eakins completed the test successfully. The underwriter's representative approved the coverage extension based on the visual impression of the test, rather than any technical assessment of the actual risk parameters. The approved coverage contained limitations that nobody involved in the production, read carefully enough to notice, would have created complications had anything gone wrong during filming. Number 8. McQueen practiced the jump approach on a different motorcycle. Steve McQueen's personal preparation for the barbed wire jump sequence did not involve the Triumph TR6 Trophy that he would eventually attempt the jump on during principal photography. His practice sessions were conducted aboard a different motorcycle, whose handling characteristics the stunt coordinator considered more forgiving for developing approach technique without exposing the picture bikes to unnecessary wear. The practice machine was a contemporary American motorcycle that shared approximate weight and handling characteristics with the TR6 Trophy without being an irreplaceable picture vehicle. McQueen completed numerous practice passes over a smaller preliminary structure before progressing to full-height rehearsal jumps on the practice machine. His transfer to the actual TR6 Trophy for the filmed sequence therefore involved a handling adjustment that the stunt coordinator had not fully accounted for in the preparation program. McQueen later acknowledged in a conversation with his biographer that the TR6 Trophy felt meaningfully different from the practice machine in ways that he had only seconds to register before committing to his first filmed attempt. Number 7. The barbed wire was replaced with rubber substitutes, the production never disclosed. The barbed wire strung across the border fence in the Great Escape's jump sequence was not real barbed wire. The production safety team replaced every strand of genuine barbed wire with a rubber substitute manufactured specifically for the sequence by the props department. The substitution was never disclosed in any production press material, creating the lasting impression that McQueen and Eakins had jumped over genuinely dangerous military specification wire. The rubber substitute was engineered to match the visual appearance of real barbed wire at filming distances, while eliminating the lacerating hazard that genuine wire would have created for any performer or stunt rider making contact during a jump or landing. The props department's construction of sufficient rubber substitute wire to populate the border fence structure consumed 2 full working days. The finished substitute was visually convincing enough that the deception survived decades of public assumption before being confirmed by a surviving props department crew member in an interview conducted in the 1990s. Number 6. The Triumph TR6 Trophy from the production was found in Japan. Decades later, one of the supporting Triumph TR6 Trophy units used during the Great Escape's production was located in Japan in 1997 by a McQueen memorabilia researcher who had been tracing the production's vehicle disposal records for several years. The bike had left the United States through an export transaction in the late 1960s, whose documentation gave no indication of its film provenance. It had subsequently passed through at least 4 Japanese owners across 3 decades, the last of whom had restored it to running condition, without any awareness of its connection to the production. The researcher identified it through a combination of frame number cross-referencing against production records and a surviving identification mark applied by the transportation department during filming that had survived beneath subsequent paint layers. The Japanese owner, once presented with the authentication evidence, chose to retain the bike rather than sell it, relocating it from storage to a prominent display position in his private collection. He subsequently became one of the most comprehensively informed private owners of Great Escape production material in Japan. Number 5. The chase sequence contained a continuity error that Triumph's engineers spotted immediately. When the Great Escape was released in 1963, Triumph's engineering staff watching the film identified a continuity error within the motorcycle chase sequence that general audiences entirely missed and that has remained unremarked in mainstream film criticism for decades. The error involved a mechanical component on the TR6 Trophy that changed configuration between 2 consecutive shots in a way that was physically impossible without the bike being stopped and the component manually adjusted between the cuts. The specific component involved was visible only to someone with intimate technical knowledge of the TR6 Trophy's engineering. Triumph's engineers saw it immediately. The error had occurred because 2 different bikes were used for the consecutive shots without the continuity supervisor catching the mechanical discrepancy during filming. When Triumph staff raised the error in internal communications, the response from the organization's commercial side was to suppress any public mention of it, rather than draw attention to a production detail that might undermine the sequence's dramatic impact. Number 4. McQueen kept one TR6 Trophy without the production's knowledge. Among the motorcycles connected to the Great Escape production, one TR6 Trophy unit departed the filming environment without going through the official disposal process that accounted for the rest of the fleet. Steve McQueen retained a unit from the production through an arrangement that operated outside the production company's formal vehicle inventory management. The bike was transported to McQueen's personal property in California through logistical channels that the transportation department's records do not reflect. Its absence from the official disposal documentation was apparently not noticed during the post-production vehicle accounting process, or, if noticed, was not pursued. McQueen's personal vehicle collection at his Solar Drive property in California subsequently included a TR6 Trophy that he referenced in conversations with motorcycle associates as connected to the production, without providing specific details about how it had come to be in his possession. The bike's subsequent fate following McQueen's death in 1980 has been a subject of persistent inquiry among his estate researchers, with its current location remaining unverified through any publicly available documentation. Number 3. Triumph's sales figures showed a measurable spike, specifically traceable to the film's release. Triumph Motorcycles TR6 American sales data from the period following The Great Escape's 1963 release contains a measurable and specifically traceable increase in TR6 Trophy sales that the company's own sales analysts formally attributed to the film's box office performance in their internal quarterly reporting. The spike was not immediately apparent in the month of release. It emerged progressively across the following 2 quarters as the film's audience expanded through wider distribution and repeat viewership. Johnson Motors, Triumph's American distributor, reported to the Meriden factory that a specific proportion of TR6 Trophy inquiries during this period were explicitly referencing the film and McQueen by name, providing the clearest available evidence of direct commercial causation. The sales increase was sustained across a longer period than Triumph's analysts had projected in their initial assessment, eventually contributing meaningfully to the TR6 Trophy's production continuation for longer than the model's development cycle would otherwise have supported. Triumph had accidentally created their most effective sales campaign in their American market history without spending a single dollar on its execution. Number 2. The jump structure was built incorrectly and rebuilt overnight before filming. The ramp structure constructed for The Great Escape's barbed wire jump sequence was built to incorrect specifications during its initial construction and required complete overnight reconstruction before filming could proceed as scheduled. The construction error was identified by Bud Eakins during his familiarization walk of the jump structure on the afternoon before the sequence was scheduled to film. Eakins identified that the ramp angle had been built to dimensions that differed from the specifications the stunt coordinator had provided to the construction crew. The deviation was not enormous in absolute terms, but was sufficient to alter the bike's flight trajectory and landing point in ways that Eakins calculated would create an unacceptable landing scenario. The stunt coordinator confirmed Eakins' assessment, and the construction crew was recalled to the location for an overnight rebuild. The crew worked through the night to demolish and reconstruct the ramp to the correct specifications. Filming proceeded the following morning on a structure that had been standing for less than 12 hours. Nobody connected to the production disclosed the overnight rebuild in any contemporary press material. Number 1. The most authenticated surviving TR6 Trophy from the production has never been ridden since filming. Concluded the single Triumph TR6 Trophy unit, whose continuous documented provenance from The Great Escape production through to present-day ownership has been most comprehensively verified by independent authentication, has not been ridden, started, or mechanically operated in any form since the final day of principal photography in 1962. Its current custodian, a private collector who acquired it through a fully documented chain of title, traceable directly to the production's official disposal records, made the decision upon acquisition to preserve the bike in its exact post-filming mechanical state rather than restore or operate it. The fuel remaining in the tank at the end of the last filming day has never been drained. The engine has never been turned over. The tires carry the same air pressure they held when the transportation department parked the bike for the final time on the West German location. Every mechanical component is in the state the production left it in over 6 decades ago. Restoration offers, museum loan requests, and acquisition approaches from the Steve McQueen estate, the Triumph Motorcycle Museum, and 2 separate film heritage institutions have all been declined. The collector's position is that the bike's value lies precisely in its unaltered state, and that starting the engine would destroy the only authentic mechanical record of what the Great Escapes TR6 Trophy felt like on the last day anyone rode it in 1962. And there you have it, 20 genuinely extraordinary secrets buried inside the most celebrated motorcycle jump in cinema history. The Great Escapes Triumph TR6 Trophy was never simply a prop or a stunt vehicle. It was an accidental cultural monument, a commercial miracle for a manufacturer who never saw it coming, and a machine whose full story remains locked inside private archives, undisclosed settlements, and an unstarted engine sitting somewhere in a temperature-controlled room. Share this with every McQueen devotee and motorcycle historian you know.